Crazy part is, most people believe that these three things will actually save your life. They don't. Let's pretend you're lost in the desert and you need water and you don't have any. So where are some places you can get water? One commonly held terrible piece of advice is to drink your own pee, because it's mostly made up of water, except there's 5% of that that's all made up of just waste from your body, and even though the urine might keep you alive a little bit longer, you'll ultimately die of kidney failure. So you don't drink your own pee. Instead, you head over to some cactus you see nearby because you remember reading or hearing in school that you can drink the water inside of cactus. Except, unless it's one really specific kind of cactus, you'll be drinking lots of alkaloids and chemicals that will make you viciously ill, and you'll start vomiting and you'll have diarrhea and you'll die from dehydration much faster. So as you're sitting there wondering what you're going to do next, a venomous snake bites you. And so you instinctively start sucking on the bite to remove the poison, but you can't because it goes right into your bloodstream, and all you'll do is die much faster from infection. Crazy part is, most people believe that these three things will actually save your life. They don't. Let's pretend you get stuck in a blizzard on a mountain, and you need to stay warm. So how are you going to do that? You remember hearing somewhere that alcohol is supposed to keep you warm. So you whip out your flask, you take a swig, and sure enough, you feel warm already. You feel flush in the face. But it's an illusion, because what happens is alcohol, it increases blood flow to the skin and away from your core. So it plummets your core temperature, increasing the odds that you'll get hypothermia and die. So you stop drinking booze and you head off for a cave you see in the distance. Once you get inside the cave, you remember that you know how to make a fire. And so you do. Except the problem with fires inside of caves is it starts to expand the rock above you, causing it to crack and eventually caving in on you. So you narrowly escape the cave-in, only to hear something in the background. A grizzly bear was in the cave with you, and now it's charging out to avoid the cave-in. But you remember, humans can outrun bears, and you start taking off thinking, dumb bear, and it just catches you. These are pretty cool, but it's the plot twist at the end that's gonna get you. You wake up stranded on a deserted island, and now you need to go find drinkable water. So where are some places we can find that? You look around the island and you notice a whole bunch of coconut trees, and you think, well, people drink coconut water, I'll just drink that until I get rescued. Except if you only drink coconut water and don't supplement it with another water source, you will develop wicked diarrhea and will die of dehydration. So you start looking for an alternative source of water. And you remember from that documentary about cannibals that it is safe to drink your own blood. So you cut your arm open, you start drinking your own blood, but what you failed to understand is only in small doses is that okay. Beyond a couple teaspoons, and you'll develop something called hemochromatosis, which results in your lungs filling with fluid, and you basically drown from the inside out. And so realizing the state you're in, you forget that there's an animal on the island that can smell your blood. And it's a land shark, and he rips you to shreds. The last one completely blew my mind. There exists a plankton called dinoflagellates that if you consume it, will reverse your sense of hot and cold, and it can last for years. Scientists recently discovered some sharks living in an active volcano, but they can't get in to study them because, well, it's a volcano and it's too hot. In 1972, Vesna Vulovic fell out of a plane at 33,000 feet, no parachute, and lived. Sour Patch Kids and Swedish Fish are made by the same manufacturer, and in fact, the red Sour Patch Kid is literally a Swedish fish, except with sour sugar on it. The only people that know how to open the United States president's car doors are the Secret Service. And last but not least, 1 million people got together and decided to follow this clown on TikTok, and I've got to say, guys, I'm touched. I don't know what to say. Thank you so much for giving me this platform and for supporting me, and I love you guys. Thank you. The crazy part is, most people believe that these three things will actually save your life. They don't. Let's pretend you're at the ATM and this guy comes up behind you with a knife. He demands that you pull out as much money as you can and give it to him. But you remember that if you just punch in your ATM code backwards, it will still give you cash, and it will tell the authorities that you're being robbed. Except that's a myth. And all you end up doing is locking your account, making your attacker that much more suspicious of you. And so what does he do? He gets ready to actually attack you. But what do? You remember that you're a karate master, and so of course you're gonna fight back. And so while you're getting in your stance, he just instantly stabs you. Because disarming someone with a knife is so hard to do, even if you're experienced at it. It's like trying to disarm a child who's got an uncapped marker without getting marker on you. It ain't gonna happen. So now you're stabbed, but you remember, I can just yank this bad boy out and apply pressure and be fine. But that's not true. You bleed to death. The crazy part is, most people believe that these three things will save your life. They don't.
Let's pretend you've just moved into your brand new house and you hear some strange noises coming from the basement. Although it may seem really appealing to want to go downstairs and investigate your basement, it's a terrible idea because there's going to be a demon down there. But you decide you still want to go down, and so of course, what's down there? A demon. And as soon as you reach the base of the stairs, they grab you, they start throwing you against the wall, you manage to scramble back upstairs and slam the door behind you, narrowly escaping death. At this point, most people believe that the right thing to do in this situation is to get your Ouija board out and try to make contact with your demon to maybe convince them not to harass you. But demons don't respond well to that, and typically it only incites them to do more damage to you and your family. You play with a Ouija board anyways, you make contact with your demon, and before long somebody's possessed, and your demon's charging out after you. You take off running, but then you remember that if you just forget how to run, no demon can catch you. Except that's not true. They will catch you. I might eat the first two, I would never eat the last two. This is pufferfish, and it's a Japanese delicacy. It's also extremely poisonous, so much so that it takes 2 years of training before you're allowed to serve this stuff. Because one pinhead of the neurotoxin found in these things can kill 30 humans and there's no antidote. Ackee is the national fruit of Jamaica, and it can only be eaten totally ripe. If you eat it unripe, or if you eat these black seeds, you develop something called Jamaican vomiting sickness, and it can kill you. This is fried monkey brain, and it's served primarily in Asia. And somewhat ironically, if you eat this stuff, you run the risk of developing something called Creutzfeldt-Jakob's disease, which is like mad cow disease, and it drills little holes in your brain and ultimately kills you. And last but not least, you have blood clams, which are popular in Southeast Asia. They can cause hepatitis, dysentery, and typhoid, and roughly 15% of people that eat these things will be infected. The only one you might accidentally do is number 14. 125,000 pieces of tuna sushi, 11,000 oranges, 500 teaspoons of sugar, 400 bananas, 130 teaspoons of chili powder, 85 chocolate bars, 70 cups of coffee, 48 teaspoons of salt, 37 and a half tubes of toothpaste, 18 apples worth of seeds, it's just the seeds, 5.1 pounds of spinach, 2 whole cows worth of beef, 1.5 gallons of water, 2 cherry pits if you chew it, and of course, if you eat 1 polar bear liver, that'll get you. Most people believe these 3 things will save your life. They don't. Let's pretend that you're on vacation with some friends in this cabin, and you hear on the news that there's actually a killer on the loose in the woods surrounding your cabin. What do? Instinctively, you're going to want to ditch your friends and just start running into the woods. No shoes, no weapons, no cell phone, no sense of where you're going. But that's actually a terrible idea because the killer is in the woods, and you'd be putting yourself more in harm's way, not less. So you decide to stay put, and then you remember that your friend drove you all to the cabin in their brand new Lamborghini that was working like 5 minutes ago. So why can't you just pile into that and drive away to safety? The problem with that is anytime you're in a cabin in the woods and there's a killer on the loose around your cabin, even if it's a brand new car, it's not going to start. So don't even go out and try it. You're just sitting in the cabin doing nothing when all of a sudden you feel like someone could be watching you and you want to turn around and make sure no one is. Don't turn around because if you do, the killer will magically appear behind you. Most people will... I can't even do this. Most people believe these 3 things will save your life. They don't. You're watching TV late at night and an urgent news bulletin comes on warning you there's been a zombie outbreak. You look out your window and sure enough, there's a zombie. What do? Your instincts are going to tell you to start sprinting around your house, turning on lights, smashing glassware, screeching like an owl, but you really shouldn't do that because you'll be alerting the zombie to your location, not repelling it. So instead, you decide to make a run for town. On your way, you see a group of people blazing down the road and you wonder if you should flag them down, try to get some help. But you shouldn't, because even though this outbreak is only 5 minutes old, everybody in the world who's not a zombie has already joined an evil biker gang and they just want to murder you. You take off running in order to avoid the biker gang and you reach a clearing in the woods where you run into your obviously infected best friend Karen. And you go up to give her a big hug because now you're saved. Except you're not, because Karen's a zombie and Karen just kills you. Most of you will be guilty of number 3. You're on vacation in Illinois and a local salamander dealer comes up to you and he says, "Hey, can I interest you in buying 76 salamanders?" And you're like, "Actually, that sounds pretty good. I can get a lot done with 76 salamanders. Give me all 76. You fool. 75 is the legal limit. On the last day of your tobogganing trip to South Dakota, you're feeling tired, and so you decide to avoid the slopes that day and hit up the local cheese factory and take a tour. You get inside, you start feeling sleepy, and you decide, you know what, this is a good place to take a nap, and so you do. You fool. It's illegal to nap in cheese factories in South Dakota. It's nighttime and you've just arrived in New Hampshire for the National Spelunking Championship, and you're totally stressed about the competition the next day. So you go down to the beach to collect yourself, clear your mind, and you notice a huge amount of seaweed on the beach, and you think, maybe I should collect this, and so you do. You fool. You can't collect seaweed at night in New Hampshire. Most of you will be guilty of number 3. You've just arrived at the high school in Ohio where you're about to give a presentation on how to build papier-mâché seahorses when you realize that you're out of glue. But luckily, you spot a dead skunk on the side of the road, you grab that carcass and you think, I can churn you up into glue in no time. You fool. No skunk glue allowed in Ohio. You wake up on a hot Sunday morning in Atlanta and you decide you want to treat your 2 rattlesnakes to some ice cream. So you head down to your local parlor and you get 2 cones, 1 in each fist. And as you're walking back, you remember that you locked your front door and you're going to need to get your keys out. So you take 1 of your cones and you slip it into your back pocket to free up that hand to get to your keys. You fool. No ice cream allowed in your back pockets on Sundays in Georgia. You're flying your plane into Alaska for a Quidditch tournament and you spy some moose on the ground and you start looking. Your co-pilot sees you and slaps you right in the nostril. And you look over and you say, what did I do? And he says, fool. You're not allowed to view Alaskan moose through a plane. The third one, that'll get you. You're on vacation in Kentucky and a local blue duck salesman approaches you and says, hey, are you interested in buying 5 blue ducks? Yeah. Give me all 5. You fool. It's illegal to purchase less than 6. You're on vacation in Idaho and a local oversized candy salesman approaches you and says, hey, are you interested in buying a 51-pound box of candy for your fiance? Yeah. Hit me. You fool. 50 pounds is the legal limit. You're on vacation in Indiana, and a local horse salesman approaches you and says, hey, are you interested in buying a horse that can only run at exactly 11 miles per hour? Yeah. Giddy up. You fool. 10 miles per hour is the legal limit. When you finish this video, you're going to Google 2 words. In 1959, 9 very experienced Russian hikers set off on a 16-day expedition into the mountains. 7 days in and some bad weather forced them to make camp about halfway up a mountain. The last pictures of them alive were taken at this campsite. When the hikers never showed up, they sent out a search party who quickly found their campsite, and it was immediately apparent that something horrible had happened to them. All their tents had been slashed open, but from the inside, and inside the tents was all their gear, neatly folded and stacked inside the remains of the tents. No bodies, but 9 sets of footprints walking away from the camp. Using the footprints, they discovered 5 hikers who were only dressed in underwear who had died of hypothermia. They found the other 4 hikers 250 feet away in a riverbed wearing the clothes of their dead hiker friends. They had skull fractures, chest fractures, eyes, tongue, lips missing, and their bodies were radioactive. Official cause of death? Unknown compelling force. When this video is over, you're going to Google 3 words. In 2013, a Canadian college student was traveling alone through California when she decided to spend the night in a notoriously sketchy hotel in Los Angeles. When she didn't check in with her family that night, they actually called the police, and the police discovered that she was missing. And then the hotel released some insane footage of her in an elevator. As soon as she steps into the elevator, she presses all the buttons and then starts hiding in the corner, and then starts poking her head out of the elevator into the hall over and over again, as if looking for someone that was chasing her, but there's nobody in the hall. Then, inexplicably, she stands right in the threshold of the elevator and starts flashing her hands around like crazy and then runs away, and it's the last anybody sees her alive. It wasn't until a few weeks later when residents of the hotel noticed a foul taste in their water that they discovered her body floating in the water tanks on the roof. They ruled her death an accident, but that means she would have had to get onto a locked roof, climb a 10-foot-high water tank without a ladder, open a heavy lid, and wriggle inside the tank on her own. When you finish this video, you're going to Google 3 words. In 2014, a German man and his friends went on vacation to a seaside resort in Bulgaria. On the last day of his trip, he got in a fight with 4 other guys over a soccer match, leaving him with a perforated eardrum. A doctor prescribes him an antibiotic and advises him not to fly home the next day with his friends because a change in air pressure could further damage his eardrum. So, his friends take off the next day and he decides to stay 1 more night and checks into a cheap hotel.
That night, his mother gets a distressing phone call from him where in a low whisper he says that 4 men are coming to kill him and that she should cancel all of his bank cards. Footage from that night in the hotel shows him pacing up and down the hallway and even hiding in an elevator. Early the next day, he heads to the airport, but before he goes through security, he does something truly unexplainable that was captured on camera and has been viewed millions of times across the internet. He stops, drops all of his things, turns around and sprints out of the airport yelling, "I don't want to die here," climbs a barbed wire fence, disappears into the forest, never to be seen again. When you finish this video, you're going to Google 2 words. In 2014, 2 Dutch college students were staying in Panama when they decided to take their host family's dog out for a walk. The dog returned, but the girls didn't. After 10 weeks without any leads, a local woman turned in a blue backpack that contained the girls' cell phones and their camera. Using their call log, they were able to determine that the girls would attempt to reach emergency services 77 times, all unsuccessful, starting just hours into their trip. It was also determined that 5 days after those 77 calls, somebody tried unsuccessfully several times to unlock the girls' phones. But the most distressing thing is what was found on the camera. The first set was taken on the day they left and they were totally normal. The second set was taken in the middle of the night over a week after they had left, and it showed all their belongings neatly laid out on a rock, and it showed one of the girls who appeared to be hurt. They found their remains spread out around the area where the backpack was found, and some of their bones appeared to have been bleached. There is still no official cause of death or explanation as to what happened. There is no way you can predict the ending to this one. In 1900, a man arrived on a little island off the coast of Scotland to relieve one of the 3 lighthouse workers that was there. As he neared the lighthouse, he saw the iron railings had been folded and ripped out of the concrete, and a big boulder that sat out front had moved. When he reached the lighthouse, the door was open, and inside there were half-eaten bowls of food sitting on the table, chairs flipped over, no sign of the 3 men, but there was one clue: their logbook. In the last few entries of the logbook, one of the men describes the winds outside as being more severe than anything he's seen in 20 years. He also says they've been crying and praying for the storm to stop. But why would 3 highly experienced lighthouse workers that have probably ridden out dozens of bad storms before, and they were in a brand new lighthouse that was considered safe, be crying and praying for this particular storm to end? The very last thing they wrote before they disappeared without a trace was, "Storm ended, sea is calm, God is over all." Except here's the problem: there was never any storm anywhere near their island that week. At the end of this video, you're going to Google 2 words. In 1979, 5 men left for a fishing trip off the coast of Hawaii, got caught in a bad storm, and never returned. After an exhaustive search turned up 0 leads, the families gave up hope and people moved on with their lives. 10 years later, a crazy coincidence leads to a major break in this case. One of the men that was involved in the original search for the missing fishermen happened to be on a wildlife expedition on an uninhabited island 2,000 miles west of Hawaii when he sees something down on the beach. It was a fishing boat that turned out to be the same one from 10 years earlier, and he found a shallow grave that contained the skeletal remains of one of the 5 missing fishermen, and he was clutching this weird booklet that contained little pieces of tinfoil on every page. Experts say the boat could have drifted 2,000 miles to that island in 3 months, except the government surveyed that island 6 years after they went missing and there was no sign of them. So where were they between the disappearance and the survey, and who buried that guy in that booklet? This is a highly controversial topic. In 2016, a man posted on Facebook that the local police were going to kill him that weekend. That weekend, he died under very suspicious circumstances that we will get to. Immediately following his death, his YouTube page, which contained footage from his home's camera system, went viral. One of his videos shows a large group of police officers standing in front of his house for no apparent reason in the middle of the night. Others show what he claims to be plainclothes police officers casing his property. But the most talked about video is the one where the van shows up in front of his house, revealing a guy with a fairly high-tech camera who just starts filming his house. The man was found dead in his home after it had burned down, and he was found to have stab wounds on his back and his stomach. His death was determined to be self-inflicted. However, the debate rages on online. What happened to John Lang? I was not ready for the ending to this one. In the early 2010s, 2 15-year-old friends were camping at a state forest with their families. One night, the friends decide they want to go explore the woods around their campsite, but they want to see how far they can get without using a flashlight. A little ways into their trip, they start to hear some whispering behind them, and they quickly turn around, pull out their flashlights, and start looking for what was making the sound. After a short search, they don't find anything, and so even though they're a little bit freaked out, they decide to put their flashlights away and carry on into the woods. After a little while, they start to hear the whispering again. So they pull out their flashlights. Now they're determined to find out what the heck is making this sound. They do a very thorough search. They don't find anything, and at this point, they're too freaked out, and they decide to start heading back. As they start retracing their steps, they see what was making the sound. A woman comes out from behind a tree, crawling towards them, muttering random words. She sees them, stands up, and says, "Oh, I'm sorry. I'm looking for my campsite." They're a half mile from the nearest campsite. This is why you should always check under your bed for monsters. In 2012, a young woman who is on the phone with her boyfriend walks downstairs to the lobby of her apartment building, collects her mail, and then heads back up to her room. She sits on her bed to start sifting through the mail when she drops her phone and it falls under the bed. She lies down on the ground to try to reach her arm out to grab her phone when she notices something horrible underneath her bed. A man is lying underneath her bed with his back to her. He's in the fetal position. She manages not to scream. She grabs her phone and says to her boyfriend, "Hey, I gotta go shower. I'll call you back." And she quickly runs into the bathroom, locks the door, turns on the shower, and then jumps out her first floor window. Once she's safely across the street, she calls the police, who quickly arrive, and they go inside and they come out with a deranged, skinny-looking man. Before they take him away, one of the officers walks over to her with a very grim look on his face. He looks at her and he just says, "We found him standing outside of your bathroom holding a knife. He was waiting for you." And all you gotta do is solve the hardest internet puzzle in existence. In 2012, an anonymous user posted this message to a chat room challenging intelligent people to find the hidden message inside of it. Within minutes of it being posted, someone had found a hidden link inside of the image, which brought them to another image with another hidden message. And as soon as they got through this one, it brought them to many, many more, eventually giving way to physical locations around the globe. But every time someone had a breakthrough, it just brought them back into another puzzle that they had to solve that would bring them to another puzzle, and it went on and on. The world's best hackers worked tirelessly to be the first person to find the prize at the end of the scavenger hunt, but no one reported finding anything. A month after that first post went up, the same anonymous user announced that they had found their winners and that the puzzle was now shut off. Every January since 2012, they've launched a new puzzle, and every year someone wins and we never know what the prize is because apparently it's worth staying silent for. The last one is mind-blowing. Green, yellow, orange, and red peppers are actually all the same pepper. They've just been picked at different stages of ripeness. The club in club sandwich stands for chicken and lettuce under bacon. The total weight of ants on Earth is equal to the total weight of humans on Earth. Speaking of which, there are more life forms on our bodies than there are people on the Earth. 50% of our hand strength comes from our pinky. And last but not least, 2 million people decided to follow this dude on TikTok. I was shocked at 1 million, and now I'm just dumbfounded. I don't know how I got so lucky to have such amazing people supporting me and following me. I really can't thank you enough. Thank you guys so much for giving me this platform. I owe it all to you. Thank you. This is why you should never open your door for strangers. In 2013, a woman let her dog out to use the bathroom one more time before bed. After only a few minutes, she starts hearing scratching on her door, which is typically the sound her dog makes when he's ready to come in. But it just seemed way too soon for him to be done being outside. So she decides to look through the peephole to make sure it really is her dog. But what she sees is terrifying. A deranged-looking man is right outside her door, staring intently at her door handle, waiting for it to turn open. As she's looking in horror, unable to do anything, he starts scratching at the door as hard as he can, never leaving his gaze from the door handle. She manages to stifle a scream, she backs away and realizes her dog is still outside. So she goes to the side window, but there's no sign of her dog, and so she goes back to the door to see if maybe the man's moved. He hasn't moved, his mouth is open, and he's staring directly at the peephole. Then he turns around and walks away. With the man gone, she discovers her dog unharmed, his leash had just been cut. But that means he had a knife. This story is why people are scared of the dark. In the early 2010s, a man and his dog were staying at a very isolated cabin in the backcountry of Oregon. One day, he notices some human footprints leading up to and then disappearing away from his cabin, but there aren't any cabins anywhere near his, but he writes it off. That night, he wakes up to the sound of footsteps on his roof. Feeling brave, he heads to the balcony to take a look. He doesn't see anything on the roof, but his dog sees something out in the forest and he starts growling. The man starts to scan the tree line and then he sees it. A freakishly tall man is squatting on a branch just 20 feet away from his balcony. His arms are outstretched, his mouth is open, no expression on his face. The man, in terror, backs into his house, grabs his dog, shuts the door, shines the light on the branch, but it's gone. Now feeling freaked out, he shuts all the blinds, makes sure all the doors are locked, he gets in his bed, and for the next several hours he hears tapping on both of the two doors from his friend outside. This is why you should always lock your doors. A junior in high school was home alone working on a paper while his parents were out to dinner. All night he sits with his back to his door, sitting at his desk with his noise-canceling headphones on. Around 11 o'clock, he takes his headphones off at the same time his parents are returning to the house, and he hears his mom from downstairs yell, "Hey Adrian, what happened?" Confused, he runs downstairs and sees right away what she's looking at, muddy footprints all over the rug. He tells her, "I didn't leave my desk." And then they realize someone must have broken in. They look at the footprints and there's none leaving the house. They're worried someone's still in the house, so they run into the garage, terrified, call the police. Police arrive and they don't find anyone in the house, but they do make a chilling discovery upstairs. The police bring them to the kid's bedroom door, which had been left open all night, and they point to the message written on it in Sharpie. This is the actual transcript of what was written on his door, which means for nearly 2 hours, someone stood in this kid's doorway watching him.